as I help you too. Most people never think about a body part until something goes wrong with it. And this seems to be especially common with the hand and a certain digit of the hand, the thumb. What could possibly go wrong? But ask anybody who's injured their thumb and prepare for a laundry list of all the things that it does for you. It gives you a power grip, the ability to open jars and grasp doorknobs. And if it's not working properly, it can lead to a world of problems and sometimes a world of pain. So here to talk about the thumb is expert surgeon, Dr. Robert Markison, who has a private hand practice in San Francisco, and he's the clinical professor of surgery at the University of California, San Francisco. Dr. Markison has nearly 40 years of experience in the surgical and non-surgical management of hand and upper extremity problems, and we're very lucky to have him with us today. So, Dr. Markison, I know you're really expert about the thumb, and maybe you can take us on an overview of how this thumb is so important, why it's so at risk for injury, and what we can do to protect it.
Thanks, Deborah. Always a joy to be with you. I'm more than a casual student of the thumb, and as a soft-hearted surgeon, I like to keep people off the operating table, but every week I'm replacing 1 or 2 thumb carpo-metacarpal joints because of abuse over time or perhaps bad luck. At any rate, we know that thumbs are us in the sense that 45 to 50,000 years ago, we finally evolved the final form of the thumb, carpo-metacarpal joint anatomy, according to Don Johansson, Mary Marsky, Institute for Human Origins, Arizona, paleoanthropologists who've told us that the human story of radiating out of sub-Saharan Africa as a species, north through the Middle East, turn right Asia, turn left Europe, and then go up land isthmus, North America, South America, both Australia and so on, was all about brain-thumb linkage, the final form. There are 9 vectors of force playing across the thumb, including a meaty muscle wad, thenar muscle, and extrinsic vectors of force, the tendons. So if you've got 9 things, and you look at the joint itself, the carpo-metacarpal joint, have 2 horses next to each other with saddles on them, and then take a saddle off one horse, turn it upside down, rotate it 90 degrees, saddle on saddle. This is intrinsically unstable to permit circumduction of the thumb, as opposed to the monkey simian thumb that goes across. We fully circumduct. Would we really want to abuse a member that's so broadly represented on opposite hemisphere of brain, sensory motor cortex, or would we be kind to these thumbs and never abuse them? Well, how do we abuse them? Well, if you're looking at going up and down, and now look at this simple contour line. If I'm in a position of function, which is nice, that's fine. But if I go flat-handed, watch this line. This line kind of pushes outward like that. And so I'm going to turn on a machine and it'll become obvious in a moment what I'm talking about. But the idea is the thumb, long bone, metacarpal, long bone of index, metacarpal, are held together by an intermetacarpal ligament complex, fairly complex set of ligaments. And so as soon as you start to go flat-handed, perhaps that's a better view, go flat-handed, then you start to stretch and pull at that intermetacarpal ligament complex. And the net effect is you can weaken that because you have odd wear and tear on the ligament. You have odd wear and tear on those mated upside down sideways saddles. And so you initiate some osteoarthritic change. It may not immediately be radiographically positive, but we're talking about thumb carpo-metacarpal, AKA basal joint, AKA trapezio-metacarpal joint. 25% of women over the age of 50 have radiographically demonstrable arthritis there, which may or may not be symptomatic. There are other factors that can be at play. But just imagine going up and down, up and down, up and down on a space bar.
It hurts me to watch you do that.
So there's the joint in a reasonable position. Okay. So by that I mean the metacarpal and trapezium metacarpal are okay. And I'm sorry for the scan lines. But then we get to a flat-handed posture. And that's the opposite of okay, because you can see how this is jutted out, thereby stretching the thumb index intermetacarpal ligament system.
The hand,
Position of function is just like that, as if you're
yeah,
holding a bar.
exactly.
So you can see the hand somewhat opposed to the other fingertips.
Fingers, yes.
But always to be avoided is flat-handed posturing, because of wear and tear on that joint. You never want to do unnecessary push off of any sort, because you'll really accelerate wear and tear there. There are other factors that can be contributory, obviously, but the whole point is this is homage to brain-thumb linkage. It's exploitable 9 vectors of force, and perhaps equally important, the idea of force couple or transmission of load, amplification of load as we go from thumb tip to the vulnerable basal joint. And what I mean by that, 1 ounce here registers as 10 to 12 ounces here. So in
Wow.
other words, you decide to squeeze maximally and you're 10 pounds, perhaps 20 of pinch, 10 pounds becomes 100 to 120 pounds. And that has to do with biomechanics, physics principles, and 9 vectors of force going over that joint. And that's been figured out in laboratories, cadaver dissection and force measurement and so on. So never over pinch, never over grip. It's completely unnecessary. And more than that, potentially destructive.
So you only use the force that's necessary.
Absolutely. You go to minimum. It's just like my pianists and violinists, guitarists, and other instrumental category patients or others doing jeweler's work and so on. I tell them go to absolute minimum force without disturbing work product. So you're a pianist, should you go mezzo forte, forte, fortissimo, or do you always practice pianissimo to get everything figured out in terms of the structure of music? And then when you must perform, you can go at a little bit greater force, but never practice beyond pianissimo. So it's kind of a musculoskeletal whisper of sorts. If ANSI standards say 1.5 ounces key pressure per character generated on a keyboard, wouldn't you want to go to least pressure? Wouldn't you want to take your little cell phone or other recording device, go around the perimeter of the keyboard as you type and strain to listen, thinking to yourself, wow, I want that typing so quiet, it's like a leaf falling on a pond in autumn. That's it, never percussive.
Yes, I think of, kissing the keys rather than pounding on them. And it's interesting because sometimes they have a lot of energy and they just whack away. And it's a very dangerous thing to be doing considering the amount of force that's going through the fingertips. The other thing that you mentioned once to me was with your phone, there's no give. It's not like a trampoline where there's a little bit give. The phone is flat, so you're constantly tapping on an unforgiving flat glass surface. And I think you said, correct me if I'm wrong, that was hard on your hands.
Well, it is hard. The absence of any sensory feedback, any feedback mechanism, no comfortable bottoming out, as you say, trampoline or sitting on a sofa. There's a big problem with that. And emeritus industrial engineering professor David Thompson, 1989, Stanford, looked at the aggregate force going through the bottom of a keyboard with 60 words per minute, 7.5 hour workday, 30-minute break, doing alphanumeric typing, 2.2 tons through the fingertips. That doesn't count what goes through the thumb at 10 to 12x. And then the experimental subjects were hurried. Oh, you're late, you're late, you're late. And they got up the winner 4 tons in a workday. So why would you walk around a high school track on your hands if you don't need to?
What's interesting is, I don't know if you've ever had this experience, but I went to an antique store and I actually typed on an old Remington or one of the old, maybe it was a Smith Oliver, an old typewriter, and it was heaven. The keys were counterweighted and it was very pleasurable because you were using your whole back. I could feel the signals from my rhomboids all the way through, and it was sort of like a dance. It was much more pleasurable than typing on a computer keyboard.
Exactly right. And the manual and subsequent electronic keyboards that came through up to the IBM Selectric were useful in the sense of understanding bottoming out and having sensory feedback. That all changed with computer keyboards. Some are trying to get back to that movement equivalent to electric typewriters, but they haven't made much progress, nor have they embedded any feedback device within the software so you could see visually what you're doing and should not be doing.
Yeah. Sum up the thumb. Basically, you want to protect your thumb by not getting into a flat hand position, not making circumductive movements or this movement as you would if you were texting or something like that. Anything else that you want to add to that, Dr. Markison?
No, just if you're doing alphanumeric work, words and numbers, use voice recognition software if English is a good first or second language. Never use hands unnecessarily in a computer interaction. If you're doing any texting, then use a little stylus instead of using your thumbs. And from youth, cultivate ambidextrous use of the hands, including